SNC Tahoe and Steve Wozniak share the belief that entrepreneurial ideas have the power to unite people and create opportunities for a better world. Entrepreneurial thinking is one of the college's core themes. We consider all of our students to be innovators and entrepreneurs. In fact, as Nancy said, regardless of major, all students take an entrepreneurship class. From Bachelor of Fine Arts exhibitions to business plans, from independent research to service learning in South Africa, SNC Tahoe students have a way to explore their own creativity and passions. I'd like to give you a brief biography of our special guest today, Steve Wozniak. A Silicon Valley icon and philanthropist for more than 40 years, Steve Wozniak helped launch the PC revolution and helped shape the computing industry. His design of Apple's first line of products, the Apple I and II, and his influence in the popular Macintosh established his status as a tech titan. The Woz, as Steve is affectionately known, was awarded the National Medal of Technology by President Ronald Reagan in 1985, the highest honor bestowed on America's leading innovators. In 2000, he was inducted into the Inventors Hall of Fame and was awarded the prestigious Heinz Award for Technology, the Economy, and Employment for single-handedly designing the first personal computer and then redirecting his lifelong passion for mathematics and electronics toward lighting the fires and educating grade school students and their teachers. Wozniak is chief scientist at Primary Data and is a published author with the release of his New York Times bestselling autobiography that Nancy showed us, I Was, From Computer Geek to Cult Icon. In 2014, he was awarded the Hoover Medal, a prestigious honor given for outstanding extra-career services by Engineers to Humanity, and was inducted into the Industry Week Manufacturing Hall of Fame. Please help me in welcoming Steve Wozniak. I'd also like to introduce you to today's moderator. We're going to have a discussion-style format today. Please help me welcome Reno's own Michael Thomas, Chief Marketing Officer and partner at Noble Studios, a leading digital marketing agency headquartered in Northern Nevada. Please let's welcome Steve Wozniak and Michael Thomas to the stage.
I silenced my phone, as I'm sure many of you did. Be sure you silence your watches now too.
Good. How are you today, Steve?
This is an incredible day. I mean, the presentation by your founder sort of is, almost had me in tears.
Well, it's hard to follow that, but we're going to do our job.
One thing to remember is today, in the internet, you can be very anonymous in a lot of ways with a lot of code names and secret names because you can't get your real name on Google anymore. But those of us who are ham radio operators, WA6BND, we had it long ago, 16 years ago, 7 years later, we were hidden, and that was the name we went by. Our friends only knew us by that name in the world.
That's good. So before we get started, for the audience, we're going to go through a lot of topics today. And the idea for me is to keep you going because we want to hear a lot of your thoughts. But before we go, connection to the place, beautiful setting here. Tahoe has a special place for you. Explain a little bit about how long you've been coming up here and what you feel about Tahoe.
You know what? Even by the time I got to college age, I had never been to Tahoe once. I lived in the San Jose area of California. Very odd and strange. First time I ever saw snow for real. I flew out with two friends in high school to Boulder, Colorado, and it snowed that night. And that was the only school I would apply to. I loved that. I loved that cold white stuff, throwing snowballs in your underwear and such. And I don't know, that was just it's a different feeling than you've ever had. And I learned to take the chill feeling you get, the stinging, as a freshness. Just like we said, I always call that, it feels like the air is fresh, and I love it to this day. When we went to Antarctica, I was the only one in shorts. As long as the wind doesn't blow.
Let's start with a little bit of past. We know you have a lot you're doing right now, but let's talk about the early days of Apple and starting way back there. So I always say there's the history and there's the story that people know, and not often are they always the same. So tell us how you first met Steve Jobs.
Okay, well, I look at Steve Jobs, a lot of people say Steve Jobs, one was during the early successful Apple 2 days until he was fired, which he wasn't. And Steve Jobs 2 was when he came back to Apple, a little more maturity, a little more careful with people, and worked on some secret great products as they turned out that modified our lives a lot, although they weren't computers where we started. I knew a Steve Jobs 0 before all of this. before all of this, I met him when he was 16 years old. First day I met him, I had to bring him down to my house, and we talked about things about life and pranks we had played at the high school, and he had some electronics experience. He'd taken a class, but none of his teachers were the same as me, so I don't think he was in any of the higher level classes. I was like the math award star in my school, science star. So, but we compare all these things, but the first thing, and he was always thinking about kind of trying to talk a little bit of a futuristic. There were people that were important, artistic people like Mozart and Beethoven and Shakespeare. And so I took him down to my house. He was too young to have albums, records of the old days. And I had every single Bob Dylan album up till then, and some bootlegs I had found out how to buy. And I showed him the liner notes and the words to songs, and he took them home, and that became a big part of our life. So we would prank around, we'd play jokes on each other, we would drive to concerts, we'd go looking for interesting things in life. And I was so technical. I could actually create things. Steve was never really like a designer. Technically, he didn't have the background. Didn't have any computer hardware, software background. Didn't quite get to that place, but he wished he had it. And so for about the 5 years leading up to Apple, we were friends in a way. He lived in Oregon, but once in a while he'd come into town, and he'd always come by me, and he'd see what was the latest thing that I had designed and built for fun. Never for money, never for companies, just things I built for fun. And he turned every one of them into money for 5 years. Steve was, I had it good. Out of high school, I would never have to worry about a job. I was that advanced. And Steve had no money at all, zero, trying to live on the 000, a couple of bucks makes a difference for a month. And so he had jobs as a salesman, selling surplus electronics. So he'd come in, anything I saw, he instantly thought, I know how we could talk somebody into buying this and sell it. He was incredible at it. He did that over and over. And these were things like early video games, like I built my own Pong, and he took it down to Atari, and they thought he designed it, and they hired him. and then I designed the game Breakout, where you hit a ball against bricks. I designed that for Atari. While Steve worked there, and those were fun times. We were young kids, and we just enjoyed life. And you'd go in, new companies like that, new technology companies like Atari, starting a new industry called arcade games. You'd go in at night. Steve worked at night because the engineers on the day shift didn't want to be around him. But it was great going at night, and I could play all the games that were being done on the factory floor. It was like an open thing. Nowadays, you go into a tech company, everything's locked up and so tight, nobody can talk about anything. No, it's a fun time. So I designed Breakout. Eventually I designed terminals that you could get onto this early thing that was way before the internet called the ARPANET, sponsored by the US government and the military ARPA unit. And the ARPANET, you could contact 6 computers in the United States. 6 computers, MIT, Stanford Research, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, and a couple others. And whoa, I had to have this. So but I could design anything to build anything on my own. And what I thought of was my television is the output device. Input and output cost more than a computer. Computer's a brain, but a computer doesn't work unless you can get information into it and get information out. Oh, that was ungodly, unforbiddably expensive. I told my dad in high school, someday I'm going to own a 4K computer. This is back when there were no computers anywhere. I'm going to own a 4K computer. And he said, because 4K is enough to really do useful work. And he said, how are you going to do that? It costs as much as a house. Huh? I said, I'll live in an apartment. I mean, sometimes you get these deep goals that are part of your soul so deeply. So I was going to have a computer if I could ever build it. And I just kept going up and up the steps and teaching myself, never for a pay, never for a job. Now I did, for these 5-year period leading up to Apple, I did have an incredible job. Well, I had 1 year of college, and I had a few years of an incredible job designing the hottest product of the time. Look at what's the hottest product out right now. Maybe you'd say the Galaxy S8 or the iPhone 8 or whatever product you want to pick. Oh my gosh, I got to design these things, and I didn't have a college degree. They just brought me in, interviewed me, and I knew how to design anything in the world off the top of my head real quick. So I had a great job. And then I was doing all these little side projects, inventing things of my own, building them for fun and for other people, and I would usually charge 5 cents. Like a guy from Hollywood came and said, we don't have movies in hotels. We want to build the first system that somehow takes a bunch of VCRs, they were just out, and we want to combine them and let you order a movie to your hotel room. Now it's so common, but I got to design the very first system ever. I mean, I got to do these things. And I would always charge 5 cents.
And your job was at HP.
And in college, when I went back to my No, actually, my third year of college at Berkeley, and if people had a term paper, we had old typewriters. You couldn't cut and paste in those days. You couldn't make easy changes. You had to type perfectly. If you typed one letter wrong, you had to put on some whiteout and retype it. And I loved typing so much, I would type a term paper for other people from midnight till 6:30 in the morning. And I would charge 5 cents. I can't tell you, I love typing and key punches for computers. So anyway,
your job,
Steve Jobs, around this time, Steve Jobs would usually be up in Oregon, living in kind of a commune type thing, and think about it. But
and your job at that paying job was at HP, right?
yeah, my paying job was at HP. Now I developed the computer for a computer club that spoke about someday we'll have our personal computers. We'll own our own computers, and we'll be able to type a message, and within an hour, 100 people could read it. And education, you would do homework, and instead of being graded the next day, well, who cares, on whether your homework's right or wrong, you'd be told instantly by a computer if it's right or wrong. The immediacy of reward and punishment. I almost got my degree in psychology. If your dog poops on the floor, you're not going to whack it on the head 12 hours later. Say bad. It's not going to understand what you meant. So anyway, where was I?
Well, last thing we leave HP. How many times did you show HP?
Yeah, so HP. Well, I developed the computer at this club, and Steve Jobs wasn't around. He didn't know it existed. I showed it off. I gave away my designs. I could type on a machine, and I could type back, and I wrote a language so I could write programs, and I passed out my designs for free. No copyright notices at all on them. I wanted to help the revolution get started. And there were very few people. There was nobody thinking it would be a business and a company and making money, but we had to start somewhere. We believed it was going to go to everybody. And so I passed out my design for free, and I even helped other people build their own versions of my computer. And then Steve Jobs came into town. Don't believe that movie with Ashton Kutcher, where he finds me and drags me to a computer club. He never attended it. He didn't know it existed. I said, "You've got to come down and see this, Steve." So I took him down to the club. I was a hero at the club, typing away on my machine. And Steve saw the interest. He's a salesman. And he came up and said, "We can make a part that will help them build your computer easier. We can make it for $20 and sell it for $40. And we should start a company." And then, but I love my company, Hewlett Packard. I'm loyal to it. I'm loyal to every school I ever went to. I am loyal to every company I ever worked for. And I would not start a company behind Hewlett Packard's back and risk getting. See, Hewlett Packard was a company in those days that only made products for engineers, and I was an engineer, heart and soul, for building products that other engineers used at HP. It wasn't like today's HP. And I was going to be an engineer for the rest of my life. Never try to move up the org chart, because I'm not good at politics and conflict and all the things you get into doing that. So that was my company. I would not risk losing my job, so I proposed a personal computer to Hewlett Packard. I got turned down for the first of 5 times. 5 times. I wanted my division to build it. We built the handheld calculators, the hottest product of the day, and it was the closest thing Hewlett Packard had to a consumer product. And we could have moved in there, but there were a lot of doubts in the minds of people who were in companies that made money.
Yeah.
So Steve, that put Steve and I. We went into business to build a little board for $20 and sold it for $40. And right away, the local store had seen me operating and knew my computer was so advanced compared to anything else. Nobody else could type into a computer and see it on a video screen. The computers are just big old boxes, and you knew how to connect enough wires to something called a teletype that cost a couple of cars. You could possibly make it do some jobs, and you'd have to be a business to afford it, not a person. So I'm showing it off in this club. This local store said, people want to buy computers that are already built. Well, we made a deal where we take our little PC board and plug in all the chips that we couldn't afford. Steve and I had no money. We're in our young 20s. We have no savings accounts, no rich relatives, no nothing. Man, how do you do that? Well, what we would do is we would get the part. We got a $50,000 order. My salary at Hewlett Packard was only $25,000. This was scary big numbers for Apple, for 2 little people. And we get the parts on 30 days credit, 30 days to pay for the parts. Build up the company that built our computers. We didn't do it. We didn't have a company in a garage. Your idea of what that means is totally mistaken. But you do have to use your house when you have no money. So the computers were built in a place in Santa Clara. Then we would drive them to the garage once a week for a few hours, make sure they all worked, and then we'd drive them down to a store that paid us cash. The store took the credit risk. That's how you live with no money. You do what you can do every step of the way. This is how Steve Jobs thought. He was the businessman. He was on the phone getting parts, getting sales. As computer stores would pop up, there were maybe a couple of dozen of them in the country, and every new one He'd worked a deal to sell some computers. And so that put us in business with the first start of Apple. Not the Apple computer that's here today. We had 2 starts. And the first start, Steve had 45%, I had 45%, and a friend, Ron Wayne, he lives in Nevada now, had 10%, but after a few weeks he sold out his 10%. Partly because he didn't think we were really going to have a product that would be worth much, and partly because, well, he was scared. He was scared. What if we didn't get paid for one for our computers someday, and we owe a bunch of money for the parts? Steve Jobs didn't have any money to pay for them. I didn't have any, so they might come to him and get his gold nuggets from his mattresses.
Yes.
Wrong way. Yeah. So,
Well, Steve, you did.
that was the first start of Apple,
Yeah.
and there were kind of the 3 of us. But the second start is more unknown. That there were 3 equals of us. The second start of Apple, the Apple II computer, I designed all on my own. Totally on my own time. I owned the whole thing. I came up with brilliant ideas. I look back now and I say, how could a human being ever think that way? It was like magic was coming out of my head like Bob Dylan words. And like color is a good example. There were no arcade games back in those days. The industry had been started by Atari. No arcade games were in color. Where you hit the ball against the bricks to get rid of them, it was all black and white. Nobody figured it out. Color TVs were expensive, and generating color cost ungodly amounts of money, and it was difficult engineering. And all those games were hardware designs. Little chips that could hold little logical elements and make signals go up and down and hold bits of data and pass them along. Had to make all the decisions that would pop stuff up on a TV screen. There was nothing that said, I know the letter A, or I know, there was no easy way to do that. It'd take half a man year at least to build a prototype game in those days at Atari. The Apple II computer I came up with, I thought about color one night. I was up 4 days and nights with no sleep designing Breakout, because you could not design a game in 4 days and nights, but Steve needed the money, I think, to buy into a commune up in Oregon. And it's funny because he told me we got $700 for it. I think he was afraid. He could have told me, I would have said, keep all the money. I get to design a game that kids will play. That mattered to me. Young people have always mattered so much in my life, especially education. But so Steve said we got paid $700, and 12 years later, the week the Mac came out, I'm on a plane. Somebody showed me a book about Atari. Oh yeah, I designed a game for them. They said, yeah, that's in there. I said, yeah, we got paid $700. And I said, oh, it said you got paid thousands. Yeah, and I was in tears. There's something about friendship that Steve should have known that I was the person that would have let him keep it all anyway. So he's up in Oregon on his commune, all happy. I don't know, whatever.
No, that's I think we could go all day with stories of those early days of Apple, but maybe we're here at higher
That's
education,
right.
Non-traditional educational route for you. Universities and institutions of higher education, you speak a lot. What can we do in the industry to create people that thought like you back in the day today? What can we do to spur innovation?
Well, there's academics. That was always important to me. My father taught me how basically school and education was going to get us to someplace in life where we could have a job and earn money. If you ever earn money, you could have a wife, you could have a family, you could have all these things, And oh my gosh, this is what's going to make me important in the world. And luckily, I was a very good student, But and I also thought independently. Outside of school, I did just learning on all this computer stuff, electronic stuff, ham radio, all on my own. Those things weren't in school, but it means so much more to you sometimes when you're doing something just for yourself. And as I took psychology courses through the years, my university years, I always paid attention to development of the human mind, cognitive development, and those sort of things. I almost got my degree in psychology, in fact. And education was so important to me. I'm married to a longtime teacher and worker in Apple education now. All my life, I told my dad when I was in 6th grade, I'm going to be an electrical engineer like you. And second, I want to be a 5th grade teacher like Miss Scrap. And eventually I had kids in school, and I had so much money. If you're giving a lot of money to schools, well, big deal. That doesn't mean it's in your heart and soul. You're not sacrificing your time. So I started trying to teach, and I wound up teaching for 8 years. I really wanted to be a teacher badly, and I wrote my own lessons like my high school electronics teacher always did, and had a lot of fun. I felt did an awful lot of good, because early on, in the early days of computers, you could take a young student having trouble in school, and the computer was an exciting thing to own. You could sit down with a young student, one-on-one, you could never fail as a teacher, and you could get that student, whoa, they were just sort of dropping out, not doing work at school. All of a sudden they'd get interested and start writing a report for 2 hours on a computer, learning how to type on a keyboard. 2 hours instead of like the normal 20 minutes that everybody else was spending, but it made it worthwhile in their lives. And I actually saw kids whose lives were kind of saved at an early age from that. A lot of teachers will tell you that at 8 years old, you can tell which students have sort of decided education isn't that important. And I feel it's probably because of grades. That, you know, if little Johnny always has the answer first, I'm not a smart one. And what you're good at is what you value in life.
Yeah.
But I'm the one who did eventually, after an airplane crash, and after 5 weeks of amnesia, called up Steve Jobs and told him, I'm going to go back to Berkeley for my last year of college. I'm going to, because it's the last chance I have. So my name was famous, so I went under a fake name. And my diploma from Berkeley says Rocky Raccoon Clark. I was Rocky Clark. But I actually got a real diploma because that represents so much hard work. You say, what do you learn in school? A lot of times you can say subjects that I took don't apply when I get a real job. No, getting through large projects is a lot of what you learn in school.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're lucky, you get into the creative sciences, which means anything except STEM. Well, in STEM subjects, every answer that's right, you get called intelligent if you have the right answers. But they're the same as everybody else. They're not like your own answer, but if you write an essay, create a music composition, draw a picture, that's your own. Everybody's different. That's creation. That's creating something from nothing, not from memorizing.
You guys have the luxury of meeting a lot of entrepreneurs today. And what advice for all of us out in the audience, or those out in the audience thinking of starting a company, you've had experience in doing that, who do you surround yourself with? Who are the most important people?
Well, most important people, almost all my friends are real close friends. I don't surround myself with high-ups in the business. It's just I didn't want to ever be one of those people. I surround myself with people who are pretty much independent thinkers that don't want a day-to-day, 9-to-5 job. They just kind of maybe want to consult or interpret or do things on their own because they know that their brilliance in their mind is what will always give them some employment. So, what was the question specifically?
Yeah, so you surround yourself
Well, I surround myself with those kind of people, but
what's the most important?
I run into entrepreneurs everywhere because ever since before personal computers, young entrepreneurship didn't really exist. Silicon Valley had grown and had a funding method called venture capital, and the thing is, it was companies that existed making silicon products, transistors and all, would spin off another product. And then there were other types of electronics companies, making radios, and they'd spin off another company. They always came out of companies. They didn't come from just young college students who had no business experience, doing things in a dorm, doing things like Steve and I did, doing things, Google. You look at all these companies that got started that changed our life so much, came from young people who didn't know that there were, they didn't really see that there were barriers. They believed in what they were doing, that it would go, even though it wouldn't. But it did. Yeah, sometimes. I mean, if we had been right about the computer world when we started Apple, the industry never would have happened. So I run into entrepreneurs now that want to be a part of that. They want to have that excitement, startup and ideas, and put them down and talk about them. Funny thing is, as I travel around the country, the world, I run into people in a lot of places that all have very similar ideas. It's easy to have an idea to speak about it. It's even easy to put down in writing. Business school trains you. Entrepreneur classes. You'll write a business plan, you'll get your ideas in order, you've got to cover these aspects of marketing and this and that. And then if I turn it over to fundraisers to make it real successful, if I raise some money, then I'll take that money and go out and hire some engineers. And that's where it's backwards. I always tell them, no, you're so much better off having an engineer, the right kind of engineers, the guys who kind of went out on their own and built projects for themselves, the makers of the world, not just the ones who got the right grades in a class. You get those kind of people around you, the real inventors, and they will think out better ideas for what your product should be, what you could do beyond what other companies would, and you should include them in the founding team from day one. So I say you got to merge the business, the marketing, and the entrepreneurship. Even if it's one person or two people, you've got to have those things covered well. And what is good marketing? Knowing what people will buy, knowing what is a good product, what's a bad product, what's it worth, what it isn't. Well, the best marketing of all is if you want it yourself. I want to build this thing for me. I want it, but I also want to impress people with it. So I want it to be beautiful, to be simple, to be elegant, to be understandable. And you'll work over and over and over. Most, 90% of your work on a project will just be when you're that kind of a person, to make it look so right, and not just to get it working.
Great answer. Moving to today. you go around the world, you see technologies. What kind of disruptive technologies do you see out there today? Maybe if you could probably talk to the rest of them, maybe a couple that get you to the two of them that are the most exciting disruptive technologies out there.
Okay, disruption became a real popular word, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, but it was kind of based around, well, some companies got disrupted. They got put out of business by other companies' products like the iPhone, and they didn't really see where the world of smartphones was going to go for some reason. So disruptive technologies today, one of the things I've always thought about is the human mind. Apple cared about making products easy, and to me that meant the human is more important than the technology. We technology makers, put a lot of work in our products to make them so simple and understandable that a human doing things the human way. Instead of a screen, a desktop is a human work, and a mouse with a moving cursor, that's 2 dimensions the way the eye sees things. I can see this and this and this and this and point to what I want. I don't have to click to get over, follow steps to get to it. So we were making easy computers, and that was the human was more important. That became my central way of judging almost all products. Then Apple came out with an early pad called the Newton Message Pad. Early like iPad, but you could handwrite. I mean, you couldn't talk to it or something. They didn't have the internet in full swing yet, but you could handwrite with your human muscles a word. I got mine the first day. I was in the San Francisco airport with my kids going to Disney World, and I opened the box, and I found that I could write a word on the notepad, and it knew what word I wrote. Hello. And I got a phone call, so I wrote a message to myself to remind myself of something later. Sarah, dentist, Tuesday, 2 p.m. That's all I wrote. And then I'm looking around. Oh, there's a word called assist. It must be a menu. I'm going to click on it. Clicked on assist, and it opened up the calendar. Tuesday at 2 p.m., it put the word dentist, and it grabbed Sarah out of my contact list. I just with Sarah. Oh my God, that changed my life forever. I got chilled, and I said, I want to do things the human way, and have the machines understand me. Have them a little close to artificial intelligence. I didn't think a machine would ever equal a brain, because the first program I wrote on a computer ever, the Knight's Tour of Chess, nothing came out. I finally did a calculation. It wasn't going to solve it for 10 to the 25th year. A computer can do a million things a second, but it can't. You need a method to solve a problem, and that comes from human thinking. That's why we don't have artificial intelligence to this day, no matter how much you hear people talking about it. Same concept. So anyway, where was I?
That's okay. You're going to say 2 technologies that you're excited about today. That was a great.
Okay, that was one. Well, of course, now we talk to our machines. That's it. The new message pad affected me quite a bit, and if I wanted to phone a friend, Jim, I would handwrite, call Jim, rather than punch 3534747 on my phone. I would handwrite, call Jim, press assist, beep, 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 beep. I just love to live in that world, and this technology can help us with things that we do as humans. Now we got Siri, and of course, Siri was not invented by Apple. Siri was an app you could buy. The third-party app store is the greatest invention Apple ever came out with. It's an openness. Yes, it's open, but it lets so many people create these great apps. Siri came out, and I had it because I like to try all the new apps. And you could talk into Siri and get things done, like say taxi, and it would know where you were standing and send a taxi there. And you could actually look up movie information. You couldn't quite buy a ticket yet. And Siri would do that. Wow. On stage for a year in my life, everywhere I went, I said, that is the greatest app that's ever been done. The only person I ever got to buy Siri was my wife. We were sitting in a restaurant overlooking Lake Tahoe. And Janet's from Kansas. She said, is that the largest lake in California? I said, yeah, I think it is. I spent 20 minutes tapping search terms into Google. I couldn't get, and other search engines I had and other browsers, I could not get an answer. I could get articles on lake sizes in California and Lake Tahoe and everything, but never is it the largest. So then I smirked and I asked a question that no computer can ever answer, just sort of pretending this is what our computer should be. It should be a person who's smart. And I said, Siri, I tapped Siri and I said, what are the largest 5 lakes in California? 5 largest lakes in California. Up came the list and Tahoe was number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What the heck? I said, you can do that? Well, I'll try mathematics. I said, what are the prime numbers greater than 87? And it started the list with 89 on up. Whoa. That's why I spoke about it for a year. But then the week that Apple bought Siri, that week I'd go on stage, what are the 5 largest lakes in California? I'd get hit with all this from real estate. But I'd hide that. Now I'd hide that and move on to what are the prime numbers greater than 87? I get prime rib places. These things kind of get worse, and they have troubles, but they're getting better. It's not intelligence. I say it's not intelligence. Yeah, you can make machines that go through what's called learning. There's learning software. They can just try something over and over and over and have algorithms, neural networks, and figure out what works and what doesn't within 1 hour. A machine can learn to play a video game better than any human. So you say, that's smart, it comes from the brain. The computer has a better brain. Well, we've always had computers that could do some types of thinking better than us, but we never had a computer that said, what should I do today? Should I try to solve the Knight's Tour of Chess? Should I, try to do some of these other things? No, a computer never says, here's what I should do. It's just a human being says, here's one for you to solve, and here's the method to solve it by. And then we call it intelligence, and that word artificial intelligence grew way out of proportion, and a lot of people talk about it being a threat. I was on stage for 2 to 3 years before Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking were scared of where artificial intelligence could lead, and I was scared, and it was a very negative type of talk. I didn't feel good saying it, but I gave my reasoning as to computers are going up and up, replacing people at higher and higher levels of intelligence in different places in our society. What if I looked at financial trades, the biggest financial trades from the investment houses, 80% of them are done computer to computer in milliseconds over a wire, instantly. Because if you put a slow human broker in the way, you lose money. What if someday you lose money by having real humans run companies? And a company makes more money, economics always wins, makes more money with no humans, and that scared me as to what it might mean. But then this idea of computer apocalypse, I gave up on it. There's so many reasons it can't happen, and one of them is we don't even know the structure of a human brain, and the infrastructure of the world is so huge. A lot of detriments. It's not right to be afraid of it. Right now, the machinery that we build helps us live our lives a lot easier. Yeah, and someday maybe we'll just be able to sit here and be fed and have entertainment and trips to Tahoe and everything. We'll have nature, and all the computers will take care of it for us, and we'll be just like a family dog. So feed your family dogs, fillet steaks, do unto others as you would.
So Steve, with that said, not negative, but what problems do you see in the future that computers aren't going to solve for us, but they're going to enable humans to get to? What 2 or 3 things are you thinking in our lifetime or in your lifetime we might see finally get cracked?
That's so interesting because I don't really think that way.
Yeah?
No, almost anything that humans do. The war between computers and humans economically, they won it 200 years ago. The machines won it. They won the war. Manchester, England. They learned how to make clothing cheap. And we'll fire people. We'll never fire the machine that makes cheap clothing. But I don't really think about, what are these technologies? I look at how are they going to change this? That's too far out to really come up with the idea. I just said right now, they're going to assist us in doing what we want to do. Now, you get into questions. Are cars going to reach level 5 where you just hop in a vehicle and it takes you somewhere? Well, what do you do on a train? What do you do on a bus? It's kind of like, what do you do on an airplane? We're kind of already there. That's not a big step, although it does take some enabling. Right now, we don't have cars that can drive themselves, and I don't think we're very close at all. Some of my friends say they'll be very real in 5 years, and I say no, I'll go for 10 to 20.
Yeah.
And the reason is experiences with cars out there now, they build in things that look at the road and can steer in the lanes. If there's anything unusual that comes up, maybe a lane that's merging in, maybe a car in front of you takes off on an exit, the cars like the Tesla make horrible mistakes. What if there's a bunch of orange cones in the middle of a freeway of Highway 70 and over here, it's the middle of a lane time? Any human being can look at the new situation they've never seen before, and based on some other things in the brain, they can formulate a way to handle it. And the machines aren't close to that yet for self-driving cars. But that's only one example. But they say, okay, we have machines now that can do thinking, and heck, somebody can take your order at Burger King. And it used to be a person, and now it's a machine. Oh, the jobs are going away. Well, wait a minute, we don't have unemployment. The jobs are going away every step of the way. Car manufacturers organize themselves, and loom makers for the clothing. Every time new technology comes, some jobs are no longer exist, that category of job. They're always replaced with new ones. Why should the world change after all these thousands of years of people?
Yeah.
Why should it suddenly change just because machines are approaching this thing called the singularity, where they can calculate as much as a brain, but they may not be able to do the job of a brain?
Yeah.
To the singularity and beyond is what some of us say.
So,
But,
yes.
but it's kind of like in the same sense as a movie.
So it's human power. What are you doing these days? What are you excited about? What are you working on?
Okay, myself, I've dedicated myself to two things in life, a lot of ethics, and when I taught elementary and middle school kids for 8 years, I try to teach them, honesty is the highest good of all. That's the apex of all that's good. So I stay that way. Now, I don't want to run companies. When we started Apple with big money, when we got the big money in, there were 3 of us. Our investor, Steve Jobs, and myself. We all owned an equal amount. And the investor was the adult. He's the one who made the company. But you never hear of it. He kind of wanted to remain shy. The story of 2 kids in a garage was a better story. So we got all this money in, and what was I going to say? I get involved in my own stories, and I want to continue them, but I want to bring it back.
Yes, you're bringing that to what you're working on today, what the things that you're passionately working on.
So when I went to work at Apple, leaving Hewlett-Packard was a tough decision. At first I said, no, I want to be an engineer for life at Hewlett-Packard, and I turned down the big money. And then one friend's phone call really convinced me I could start Apple and still be an engineer and not run a company. And that was the deal I had. I would go in the lab, I'll be an inventor, I'll run the lab, I'll design new things, invent new things, but I would not handle the business of the company. And so I never really wanted to do that. Yes, I had a couple of startups, made some exciting products even over time, but it's really not. My heart is down with few people getting together and talking about a new idea and saying, let's start a new company that didn't exist before. Today, I do a lot of speaking like this, and I especially want to speak to high school students and university students more than any other age group, because of what was going on in my development of technology on my own. You have the greatest intellectual capacity of your life at that age, as well as physical capacity to stay up late working. But if you want to stay up late partying, it doesn't really get you that far. Do something great in life and make it forever is an easier approach. So I like to speak and address the people that the most important times in my own life, making me who I became, were in those years, and I can point to them and show stories. You can read my book. I also nowadays I have a little bit of technology involvement. I'm chief scientist with Primary Data that's optimizing storage in a lot of the big companies out in the data centers. You say, cool, I don't care about optimizing storage in data centers. I just care about my latest iPhone. Well, how your iPhone works. Your iPhone's not really the computer. Your computer's out there. Your iPhone's displaying the results. So you want a good iPhone, but you also, those things are very important. You don't see how fast a response you'll get on Facebook or whatever. I was with a company before that called Fusion.io, involved in the storage industry, and we saved the life of companies like Facebook and Apple and basically every single Fortune 500 company there is, and went public and all. So I'm with that company, technically. I'm also putting on popular culture events. Put on 2 Silicon Valley Comic Cons in San Jose, heading off to do one in Tokyo in a couple months, and what else? I got other things going on.
Well, I know you talk a lot about happiness, and I remember heard you have something called the happiness. That was
the drive of my life. You know what? You think out who you are. Your personality settles between 18 and 23, college age. And that becomes how you're going to think and act and treat people for the rest of your life. And partly, there were incidents I won't talk about involving the Vietnam War, but I started thinking about life. Do I want to be one of those guys that manages all these companies? I would read magazine articles and move this person over to there and reorganize this and every day of my life bought and sold and did all these acquisitions. Do I want to be that person on the day I died? Or would I like to be the person that laughed at some jokes and made up jokes and pranks and did fun things with their friends? I'd rather be the second person, I decided. And I said, happiness is what life's about. And then my formula for happiness soon thereafter became things that you feel, emotions. What are the emotions of happiness? Smiles and frowns. What I do, turn my phone on instead of off. So smiles, my formula is H equals S minus F. Happiness equals smiles minus frowns. Easy to have more smiles if you chase a life Pursue entertainment, music, things that make you happy, people that make you happy. We do that naturally. Frowns, how do you minimize frowns? One of them was, you don't have to win an argument. You've got logical thinking of how you feel and think about something. You do not have to convince anyone else of that. You're both right. You both have logical arguments, so don't argue. Just walk away. I'm happy. I'm glad for who I am. Just be glad for who you are. And I got very good at that. So a lot of don't caring so much. I'm not going to let things really get me upset. If my car gets scratched, Janet will tell you, I just say, hey, cars get scratched. I just walk away. I don't even care about it really much. And that makes life a lot more pleasant in the head. And there was a later point in my life when I came up with a different formula after putting on some music festivals, largest music festivals ever. 1 million tickets sold each of 2 years in Southern California, called the US Festival. The forerunner by far of Bonnaroo and Coachella and all those. And Steve Jobs said, but you're really computers, you're not music production. And I just wanted to bring fun into my formula. So I changed my formula to H equals FQ. Happiness equals food, fun, and friends. For food isn't food you eat. It's the necessities of life. Food, and then you gotta have enjoyment, you gotta have people. Food, fun, and friends. And I was being inducted in my high school Hall of Fame, and the students started laughing. And I had to embarrassingly go into the microphone and say, yeah, there might be a fourth F.
We keep it PG for the rest of this. Yes, mine was one.
But a lot of my formulas were, about being a good person and not pushing other people, not being unequal to others. I just don't want to be that way. A lot of those real difficult things.
Well, thanks, Steve. We're gonna open up in a little bit to some questions from the audience, but I want to dig in a little bit deeper. We talked about your dad and the role that he played. I'm a dad, and I just wanted to ask you if you'd be a little more specific, but maybe brief about what was it in the way that your dad taught you, the way he approached teaching that made you feel like you became a lifelong learner?
Sure. I don't think I could ever be the equal of my dad in this way, but he would sit and talk about issues in the world, but he'd point out some people this way, some people. He would never say, here's how you should be. He would never impress his values on us. I'm the only one who turned out to be an engineer like him in the family. No, he would just always present things in a very open manner. You think for yourself. You have the education. You have a brain. You can decide for yourself. Whatever you decide is going to be right. And he was also an engineer that when I got into asking questions, I could build a machine that plays tic-tac-toe out of logic, and he would suggest these things. But how do I make a logic, a decision? How do I make a decision with a part, electronic part called the transistor? And he'd pull out a whiteboard, a little blackboard in those days, and he would draw some things and show where the electrons flowed. So he was also very instrumental in my early electronics education, mostly my analog side.
Yeah.
And I just look back. But my values in life are the most important thing to me. How I think about how people work with each other in politics. My dad and I would definitely not agree on politics, but the methodology, the approach of how you should consider, and what's right to you and what's not. Be good to other people is another big thing that he was really strong on. Help other people. Even our government should help other people that need help.
Yeah.
So I try to help everywhere I can. We're at a college here that gets a lot of people that care about it and see how good it is, donate a lot of money. And there's a high school in the Tahoe area called Olympic High School, and I sponsored a bunch of students to go there. There's a private high school, ones that were having trouble at home and just wanted to get out of their home and get somewhere else, get out of their schools.
Yeah.
But that's important, and education's always going to be just one of my highest priorities.
So if you do have a question, we're going to have some people walking on bikes, but last thing before we take that one question.
One other thing on the topic of education.
Yes.
We were going to build this Apple computer. We were going to start as a two-man partnership with no money. Build this Apple I computer that could help in education. And I drove Steve Jobs for 2 hours up to Cotati, California. And we visited a woman there that had a grant from Digital Equipment Corporation, and she would roll a computer into elementary schools when no computers were even found in high schools. She would roll it in and let 4th and 5th and 6th graders play on a teletype and learn how to play a game on a computer. She would talk about what parts the computer did. So for 2 hours driving back, I tried to talk Steve Jobs into giving the very first Apple I computer to Liza Loa. And he wouldn't do it, so he made me buy it for $300 and I get it. It was a time capsule. caring about what these computers would do for society. It actually started in me.
That's great. So Steve, we're going to have questions. I'm going to ask you to be restrained so we can get to a lot of questions in the few times we have. This is hard. Restraint is not a native, but just try to go through questions quick. So we have our first question over here, I believe. If you could say your name and state your question, and we'll try to get through as many as we can.
Hi, I'm G, and I was wondering if it is possible to teach or coach inventiveness and creativity.
I've never believed that it's possible to teach it, but you can inspire it, encourage it, but at a very young age. I grew up very inventive. I would have an idea, and I'd teach myself and find the way to put the parts together to make it because I wanted it. Wanting things, motivation, is much more important than knowledge even. If you want something, you'll find the way to get the knowledge. If you want to learn something, you will learn it. Much better than trying to have it just fed to you. So I don't know, whatever your question was. Inventiveness versus engineering, here's one of my answers too. I was an engineer all my life, and I did things very structured by the rules, and now I want to live in that very unstructured world, but there were inventors and engineers. I was an inventor. All my life I grew up building products. I just ride my bike down to Sunville Electronics, buy some parts, make little tone makers and whatever, and TV jammers or whatever. I felt like I like doing that. You look at the little bakers today that are even in schools. They got projects with little computers and hooking sensors on them and motors and making them do things. That's what I've been my whole life. So I was an inventor. All the inventors I ever met, the real famous ones, they would get an idea in their head and want to run into a laboratory alone and test it out, build something up on their own, and see if the idea works, if the idea is viable. Engineers pretty much could be a person, and companies need engineers. Companies need engineers too, because a company has a product that business and marketing is funneled down to this is what you have to build and design, and engineers have gone to academic school and they know how to design everything based on how it's been designed before. Inventor just thinks, how can I design it now without even knowing how it's been done before? And you'll come up with newer and better ways. So I don't think the inventiveness is something you can teach. You can inspire. For example, families and people around you and movies you watch and what inspires you makes you want to be something in the world is more what leads to it. I wish I had a real easy answer. You can certainly always be open to helping people follow their own, if they have a little direction when they're young and want to do something, let them go that way. In other words, don't force your values on them. Let them choose for themselves.
Hi, I'm Amanda. My question is, where does your love for engineering come from?
My love for engineering comes from being good at certain things, starting with math in third grade. Teacher said I was the first time ever a boy beat the girls on multiplication. So I would get the math awards in my schools in good science, and electronics. Electronics was in my family through my father, my science fair projects. I built incredible science fair projects that when I look back, when I was like 9 years old and 11 years old, I was building projects that were like master's projects at a university. I didn't know it. Just hundreds and hundreds of parts that were doing computer type stuff. I just loved the fact that I could make something different that other people couldn't, that I was different than the other people in school that are all doing the same things. I don't know, I had some specialness about it, not that it was worth money. I didn't say, oh my gosh, I want to be this way to make money someday. But my engineering, by the time I was a senior in high school and I'd be walking home from school, I was very much a social outsider. Nobody was talking to me. I would think out things in my own head. That was my conversation. And I thought out, engineering based on mathematical principles and whatever, when you design something, it works or it doesn't work. It's right or it's wrong. And to me, that was more like truth than I wrote an essay, and if I smile at the teacher, maybe he'll up my grade to a B+. I just didn't want to be that person. So I said engineering represents the greatest honesty in the world, and engineers are the best people in the world. And when I got to work for Hewlett-Packard, the company that made products engineers use, with dials and switches and signals, man, that was the luckiest thing in my life.
Another
Engineer's
question.
engineer, I called myself.
Yeah, Steve, I'm kind of interested in the concept of ethics. I've always been close to my heart. You got any thoughts on it that you'd like to share? You mentioned it earlier about ethics.
Your ethics is in you by part of your personality, so it's in you by the time you're 23 years old, and it doesn't really change how much you believe in. Just honesty all the time, only tell the same thing one way, or getting to the right answer, listening to other people, and acknowledging when they have a better idea. That's just something you really get at an early point in life. You kind of decide for yourself. I try to sometimes be an example and write a book even. Try to be an example because it's an example you can inspire other people when they're young enough to be that way. But once they get to a certain age, if they're just used to telling any lie and passing it off like it's truth, that's how they are. You can't change it. You can't change it by pointing out you're wrong.
This is more of a request than a question, but could you bring the US Festival back?
It's funny. The US Festival, such an incredible, if you ever look it up online and the groups that were there, it was the most incredible thing ever. Cost me a lot of money because we didn't have the formula yet.
Who are the groups for the audience?
I'm not going to name the groups because there were so many of them. You have to look it up. I mean, we had all the top names of the day, and to this day, you look back, you can't believe they were all in one place. And so the US Festival, in 2009 and 2010, there was a guy who was in the Navy when the US Festival happened. And he went there, and it changed his life and his belief in goodness, because we espoused a lot of goodness. We did the first video links with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, not even perestroika. I mean, this was stuff that would almost get booed. It's almost like communicating with Al-Qaeda. My approach is to personal diplomacy. Did an awful lot in those days. An awful lot that's probably not even in my book, but personal efforts between the U.S. and USSR for peace. So we did a lot at that US Festival that was so unusual, and this guy had been inspired by it. He wanted to finance another one in 2009, 2010, and he had all the engineering tools they had signed every little stake in place, and we made proposals to an Indian casino, Morongo, and we made a proposal to NASA. Ames was the fund that finally got totally accepted, approved, signed off by their directors in Washington, D.C., and then we fired a marketing guy they liked, and they backed out. So, and then this guy out east, he got pancreatic cancer and died. So it almost happened again. I was all for it. We even met with some of the groups that were in the original one, wanted to come back too.
Now the question, how excited are you about the application of augmented and virtual reality in the field of education?
I think they have incredible places in education. I've seen so many demonstrations. It's taken a little slow to come on, but it's not going to be like 3D TV that kind of had its chance and sort of didn't make it with us. But you got to talk. It's experience. The greatest things in computers, when I try something and say, wow, I have a good feeling. Somehow, I didn't know that existed before, and it's so great. When you put on, your virtual reality helmets, and you're on the moon, you're on Mars, you're in another city, you're walking through buildings and whatever, that is, more than just playing games, but games will bring a lot of people into it. That's quite an experience. Augmented reality can present a lot of information holding up your phone. A lot of information isn't there, both for entertainment, for fun, for games, but also information. Like I have this little disease called prosopagnosia, where I cannot memorize faces, new faces. I just don't do faces well. And it'd be so neat if I'm walking around and, I wouldn't necessarily even recognize my own wife if I didn't know she was there. And walk around, be neat with little glasses on, that tells me the name of everybody. And every website they've ever visited and every picture.
That would be great. We have one question in the back.
Hi, Tom Knight, alumni. I'd like to ask if you know anything future-wise for education or in general about blockchain, and maybe you know more of the cryptography algorithms of it, or just in general how it would change in the future. America. Yeah.
I don't work in cryptography and blockchain, but of course got interested in following what is this Bitcoin phenomenon that has started. And it had its own reasons, but it's so intriguing that there is a type of something that has value like gold, but no more of it can ever be created. It has a finite limit defined by mathematics. Would I trust mathematics over people who manage our money these days? Yeah, I trust mathematics. And also, I like the fact that every transaction, selling, buying, trading, it's all recorded in a blockchain that is spread out throughout the entire internet in thousands and thousands of places. And no company owns it. There's not one bank that kind of controls everything. I love that principle of a type of freedom. Trouble is, if it ever becomes really major, darn well that the forces of non-freedom, let's say, will somehow disband it and control it, and that already happens a lot, even in China recently. So it's interesting, but the blockchain principle of following all these transactions applies to things like banks and retail sales and transactions. Almost everything we do, we can now get away from one central storage house doing it for us. methods for doing that. So I'm looking forward to a really great future in blockchain. That's why we're hearing about it more and more and more, just like artificial intelligence.
Steve, you have a question in the back?
Yes, thank you for sharing a very interesting life so far, but I was just curious, in your life, what was your biggest surprise and what surprised you most?
Whoa. Usually people ask what were your failures, and I have a lot of trouble because during all the great things I did in that period, I never had one failure ever. Every project was an A+. Something was in me. I look back at myself and I do not know how a person could have been the way I was, such a genius. Now I'm only a genius at one thing, making people think I'm a genius. So what was the, you're not talking about failures, what was the
Surprise.
the biggest surprise? I love the surprises so much. I described one of them, working on my little tablet, you know, and that was one of those eureka moments. Oh my gosh, this changes me forever. I can write a message to a human, and a machine can actually implement it for me. And then Siri, what are the 5 largest lakes in California? That changed my life forever too. Oh my gosh, these machines are getting closer and closer to being like friends to us. So that's all I can come up with right now. I know tomorrow I'll have a lot more answers. I've never been asked that.
That's a good thing. That's always good. Do we have another question? Sorry, yeah, please.
Hello. Sorry. I'm kind of nervous right now.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, like in the early years of Apple, how important was it for you to make like Apple open source or closed source?
Okay, I designed the first 2 products for Apple, the Apple I and the Apple II. I owned them totally. When I could say no to the big money, they'd have to go get their own computer. The Apple II computer was so incredibly advanced. The first time ever that arcade games were color and software, that was it was so advanced that it was going to be the heart of a big company. It was all of Apple's revenues for the first 10 years of Apple, their only successful product. We started that company that really started with a product that was that good. You were going to make a company out of it. And redo your question? Yep. Favorite programming language? You just switched. That was not the question.
Yeah, that was yes, too. See?
And I have some good answers, but they're a little drawn out. And it goes back to older programming language days, but where I ran 3 programming languages side by side for several fun things, solving puzzles that you could buy in stores, toy stores even. Solving puzzles, I'd always turn them into code, and I'd write them in Logo, a nice language for education, used for simple structures and learning how to expand them. I'd write them in AppleScript, which was an English-like language. I only wanted English-like languages that a normal person could sort of read and see what was going on. And I would write them in a language from Apple called HyperTalk. Came with a program with every single Macintosh called the HyperCard. HyperTalk programming language. You could simply sit there. I taught it in my classes to middle school kids. You could actually write a command and make a menu pop up and make windows pop up and make it look like a real computer application. And every single time that HyperTalk language was a smaller program, read more in English like what it did, and was faster. So there could be so I believe in comparing languages and looking for what you want. Now there's so many choices out there, and it's almost all based on the internet. There's the internet side of things, and then there's your own iPhone side of things, and they have to talk to each other, and there's so many choices.
So Steve, there's a question in the back.
Hi Steve, my name is Lisa Stockbirch, and you sponsored me when I ran the Boston Marathon in 1996.
I don't really know you, but I did those sort of things so whenever I could.
I'm now 63. I went to Homestead High School, class of 72 with Steve Jobs, and my brother Bill Stock was your brother Mark Wozniak's best friend.
All right.
So I tried to get a message to you today. I just wanted to let everybody know what a kind and generous man, and he made it possible.
Well, that's the most important thing in my life. Lisa mentioned Homestead High School. I'll point out that the creation of our big product that started Apple, the Apple II computer, 7 of the first 10 people that were important to it and the start of Apple went to Homestead High School.
Yeah, that's another quick question.
Do you have any ideas about how we can use technology to keep our education system current by teaching high school and college students relevant skills for today's world and tomorrow's world and tomorrow and tomorrow?
Yes, I always thought a lot about education, and of course California, 50th in the nation in class size. Well, during my teaching years, I learned a lot about California. And you could have we had Proposition 13 holding property taxes level, so schools didn't have as much money as they could. You could have an election, and I paid the money to send postcards to everyone in Cupertino, always known for good schools, to vote. And we got 64% of the vote for a little higher property tax rate, and it failed because the proposition said you needed a 2/3 supermajority, 67%. It failed the next year. I did the same thing the next year. And then in Los Gatos, where I live, I even give speeches, and we passed it, and then Cupertino passed it. So for 27 years, 2 cities in the Bay Area have had more money. And you know what? I go back now, and I generally go to those school districts, and I see, renovated buildings and new stadiums. Doesn't speak to education, but you know what? The quality of a place that you are learning in does influence your life quite a bit. This is just this here is the very best. Sierra Nevada is the best. I forget what I was going to get at. But
Keeping relevant education.
You remember?
Yeah, it's okay. Relevant education.
So I thought about how do you make education relevant? When computers came in, I was there, bringing computers into the schools and thinking this is going to be such a big change. It never existed before. And people are going to come out much more educated, using their mind much better and more skills. No, pretty much you learn the same speed and the same things as before, but the classes are run the same. So you still have the same structure of, we will teach to 30 students exactly the same pages on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if they don't get something, I can't go back and be a random teacher, just make sure they learn it. I have to be on these pages in the book because I made a contract with my principal to be on. So, and then you get the quiz on Friday, and it's the standard old procedure. We didn't change the system. So now I say, if I talk about how our schools are run and how could you make them better, millions of people could speak about it just as well. They're just as bright as I could, around here, could say, here's how you have some open classes and goal-oriented projects, and you intermix people of different classes and disciplines. A lot of different things you could do, but anybody can say that. And if it hasn't changed things enough in hundreds of years, that's not the way I like to think. I always like to do things that never existed before. What doesn't exist yet? Well, what doesn't exist is my iPhone can be a little friend. Hello, what's the weather in Chile? And get an answer like a human. What if it could become a real friend like a teacher? What don't computers have in schools today? They get you access to a lot of knowledge, but they don't have a personality. They don't care. I mean, they have a little lightweight, will be friendly with you, but it's not like, I know you, I care about you, I care about your family, I know all the aspects of your life, like a real friend would know. A real human teacher. They aren't human yet. But what if we got artificial intelligence, just let's presume that it could happen quickly, to where it's as good as any human about any random subject in your life, not just one specific teaching goal, but everything in your life. That could become your best friend and maybe guide you on a path where you don't have to compete with all the other students. Everyone can have their own computer because it's affordable. Your own teacher will take you all through life and nobody fails. And that's all I can propose because it doesn't exist. But it could.
That's good, Steve. We have time for a couple more questions. So if you keep the question brief, we'll try to get through them.
Hi, Steve. You've touched on some of the great things that it's truly amazing, all these experiences. And the fun things you can do, like augmented reality. And I think the top augmented reality program was Pokemon Go. which is an app that actually requires a host of dangerous permissions, and it's tracking people. And if you actually go to something like the Android App Store, and you actually start looking at the dangerous permissions that the top apps want, they're tracking you. There's tons of spyware from China and things like that. And I'm just curious, because I know you've given to the Electronic Freedom Foundation.
I was a founder.
Yeah,
I was one of the 4 original founders on the board for the first year, Electronic Freedom Foundation, the ACLU of computers.
And I'd just like to hear your comments on, I guess the corruption from the powers of be and spyware, and concerns about the massive amount of data that's being collected.
I'm not concerned. Like, how can we stop it? I'm just saddened by the fact that it's here. I can't trust a thing on my computer. It's out of my control. I've traveled. I've been in China, Russia, everywhere. The United States probably put stuff into my computer when I was in China. I mean, it's just Like, your life is just becoming so invisible. What's that going to do to humans? They're just going to get used to being a different kind of human. It doesn't necessarily mean, they're not going to look back and say, oh my gosh, we're missing something good, because they will never know what it was like when you really had privacy. I mean, I was taught by my dad the Constitution and the 10 Amendments, the Bill of Rights, and I was taught that you had private places like your home, and people couldn't come in without a reason and a lot of evidence. Now, take your phone away when you travel and inspect your computer and all that, and I don't know, it's bothering me. So I do not like it a bit, and that's what we've gotten to. Where did our privacy go? Our privacy is what makes us human. Europe is far ahead of the United States in thinking about this, but they've got a long ways to go. Because look at Google. How does Google make their money? Not from a search engine. They make their money from tracking everything you do, especially every website you visit on a Chrome browser, knowing everything about you and selling it as advertising. Where does Facebook make its money? Selling everything about you, the data that you provided. They don't give you a cent of it, what they make. They just make Google the money off your data that you provided. What does Apple make their money off of? Selling good products.
Okay, Steve, we're at the last question, and we're going to wrap up. So is that the last question?
Yeah, hi Steve. My name is Ben Solomon.
Woohoo!
I've been around this college since 1970. One of my first helpers before Nancy came along was a guy named Bob Listener. Do you remember his name?
The name seems a little bit familiar, but it's
He
probably
wrote the first spreadsheet for the Apple, and he lived here in Incline. And
well, the first spreadsheet is what made Apple a company, made the whole industry go. It wasn't just our computer. It was the fact that there was something good that somebody found you could do with it. You couldn't do with the $1 million mainframes in the big companies.
And what I'd like to mention about him is he followed your principles. He has moved to Reno since, and he started a company to build affordable housing for low to middle income people in Reno. He's built thousands and sponsored thousands of homes down there. So it was a real honor to know Bob Listener and to know that he was involved in your company.
Good example.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for the questions. We're gonna bring it back to one final thought from you, but try to make it brief as we wrap up the program. I just want to read a quote that I really like from your book, and I'm going to slow it down and do too. But it's I got to see the before, the during, and the after. And very few people, inventors in time, can say that I had a vision, I saw it, I was part of it. My question, if we could boil it down to, how did you know, or when did you know, that you were onto something that was going to really truthfully change the world? And how would someone who's starting something be able to see that? Or was it blind luck and you didn't see it happen?
Give Steve Jobs some credit. Steve Jobs sort of saw it, here's what it could do for people. I sort of knew technically what it could do, but I wanted to be known and recognized by engineers first. I wanted them to look at my designs of the old days and my code that I wrote. I did the hardware and the software. And I wanted them to say, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Where'd you go with that? That was really my goal. What I'm glad about, though, is once we got a lot of computers around and the kids were so smart. I watched the kids, electronic kids. They were so different than our generation, so far ahead in certain things. And that was what I kind of called the after. But that was even before we had internet.
Yes.
So there's been a lot more before and afters you could look at. But what would personal computers do for people, and how would it change it? No, I'm very, very thankful, because those young kids just grew up with it, really accomplished. They didn't see the before. They didn't see the during, some of the steps. So now I like to go back and watch some of those TV shows like Halt and Catch Fire. Because it really goes through some of the steps that were going on to make technology available leading up to the internet.
Well, Steve, on that note, I know we're going to wrap up the program. I want to allow the audience to give you a round of applause for being a part of the conversation.